Okay, so we're going to continue with our primary math concepts. Last time we dealt with place value, order, and rounding, and we really didn't get to that last section on order and rounding. So today we're going to finish the end of the number concepts, teaching order and number to your primary students, and then also going through addition. And what's the main concept involved with addition at primary level? What are you doing? What are you teaching them about addition? The main concept that first graders have to learn, and of course second graders too. First graders not as much because they don't take it as far. What's the main thing with addition once you get beyond 2 digits? What's the main thing? No. The main thing would be carrying. Yes, you begin with place value, and you definitely have to teach them to line up their numbers, how to set up the problems and so forth. And definitely you're teaching them the addition families, but an overall addition procedure that you have to teach from what? Scratch. From scratch is carrying. Yes, you do teach a lot of things from scratch, but that one is a major concept that for you, as a college student, you don't even think about carrying, do you? When you're doing long column addition, it's automatic. You carry the number up to the top of the next place value row, and away you go. And you don't even pay any attention to what it actually means or what you're actually doing. You just do it. That's how you add. But that's not true. We will be teaching addition from scratch. You also will be teaching with our number concepts, you will be teaching rounding from scratch. And you need to establish the idea of how to round firmly in your second grader so that then it can be mastered and solidified in third grade and fourth grade. So then the goal would be when they get to fifth grade and they have to round behind the decimal, guess what? It's no big deal. Rounding is already a part of their math skills. So let's finish the number concepts. Let's finish the idea of order, greater than and less than, and let's cover the area of rounding. Then we'll go to addition. Okay, so we do have to, from scratch, teach them symbols. Now remember, what did we say on Tuesday? That math in particular has 3 levels. What are they? Concrete. Remember, we use manipulatives, and we're seeing the actual, like with addition, we're seeing that if I have 2 pencils over here, and I have 3 pencils over here, that all together, I have how many pencils? 2 pencils over here, 3 pencils over here, all together, I have 5. That's concrete when you've got the pencils right in front of you. And then we progress to the, what's the next? Semi-concrete, and then the abstract, right? So when you're teaching from scratch, you have to begin with the concrete. That's why we use a lot of different kinds of manipulatives, even off the cuff. You don't have to have this big, elaborate manipulative demonstration planned. What you have to do is just, you see that they're not getting it, you grab some objects, pencils, pens, red pens in my case. I have a whole bunch of them. I go grab those red pens, and I demonstrate it right in front of them right at the beginning. That's concrete. Now we're talking about order. We have to then, this is kind of abstract. For example, what in the world is that? That's an abstract symbol. Which one is it? Greater than. Always have to kind of chuckle at some of the 7th graders, and even some of the 9th graders when we do inequalities in algebra, they get mixed up which way to shade on the number line. What do you mean? They'll ask me, which way do you shade? And I'll say, which way is the arrow pointing? Very obvious, but not obvious in one sense because that's an abstract symbol. And so do your first graders use that symbol? No. Do your second graders? Yes. Do your first graders round? I don't think so. Pretty sure not. Do the second graders? Yes. I told you. Been there, done that, made a mistake, okay? Second graders start learning how to round numbers in the second semester of their math year. So and they will be introduced to this maybe at second grade, probably not till third. But the point is, that's an abstract symbol and you are teaching it from scratch. What does that tell you? That tells you you have to be creative. That tells you you have to be repetitive over and over and over and over again. Repeat, 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 review. Okay? Sometimes I feel like I said the same thing 10 times. All right, so with greater than, less than, this refers to order. And of course, first graders are not going to use abstract symbols. They're pretty much stuck in the concrete, okay? So, but you do teach first graders, and even somewhat starting at the end of kindergarten, you start talking about before and after. And you're going to teach that with respect to counting, okay? Not with respect to, but using counting. All right, in kindergarten, during their math time, first grade especially, and even sometimes into second grade, I go in the classroom and I see this big poster that has 1 through 100 just written out. Why? Well, you're a college student. When I say, what's the number before 36? Your brain immediately, you can picture it in your mind, 35. You don't even really have to think at all. It's going to be right there. First grader, I ask them that question. What do they have to do? They have to see it. So when you have the number chart, all right, when you are making visuals for this class, you're doing primary math. You're starting from scratch. You need to make visuals that can become what I like to call classroom staples. Just like you have staples in your kitchen pantry. What are staples in the kitchen? Flour, sugar, for me, pasta. Those are staples, stuff that you always have on hand that you can throw together at any time when, salt. What's another one? Butter. Milk is a staple, though it's a fresh item thing, so it's not quite the same. So same with butter. I'm thinking stuff that sits in the pantry, not the fridge. Baking powder, spices, right? Stuff that you need to have on hand, stuff that, okay, I need to bake. You don't want to have to get, what's that? Cream of tartar, whatever that is. Okay, but I don't know if that would be a staple or not, but you get the idea. You want to think about classroom staples. And when you're teaching order, when you're teaching counting, you're doing things from scratch. You absolutely cannot do what I am doing right now with college students. What am I using? I'm using the blackboard, but I'm also only verbalizing to you. I'm just lecturing. Okay, I'm blah, 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 blah. I'm giving out information. That does not work at all for elementary and especially not primary. They need to see what you're saying. So what are some classroom staples that are going to help you teach order? Make yourself a number chart. Get it laminated. Have a nice border on it. Look at, you're going to be seeing Mrs. Brader and Miss Mayville. You're going to be doing a lesson for them for practice. Look at what they have in their classroom. What's in the second grade classroom on the bulletin board, or not the bulletin board, on the blackboard ledge across the front of the room. It's up there because she uses it. Stick your head in the third grade classroom. What's on the blackboard? Stick your head in Mrs. Brader's room, the first grade room there, towards the end of the hallway. What does Mrs. Brader have on her chalk ledge? Those are classroom staples. She has that number chart from 1 to 100. I'm thinking, what in the world? Why does she need that? Well, I'm not a primary teacher. I don't quite know all the little things that I need other than the fact that you're teaching from scratch. So that means that you have to have objects and visuals every single day. Okay? So when you ask your first grader, what is the before number for 36? They're going to sit there and stare at you, and they might start thinking in their mind or counting upwards or whatever. And a lot of them are just going to sit there and stare at you, and they're not even going to take the effort to try to figure it out. But it's so much better if they have it on a visual. I tell students all the time, even in high school, write it out. Don't just stare at it. Okay? Let your eyes help your brain. You need the visuals, don't you? You only are going to remember, if you remember from our children's ministry seminar, how much are you going to remember what I'm saying to you? 10%. Hopefully you're going to remember more because you're writing it down or putting it into your computer. But that's not working in primary. They have to do. You're teaching from scratch. So what can you do to help them learn order, number, order? Counting, yes. But that's very inefficient if I'm asking them for the before number for 36, which is 35, for them to go 1, 2, 3, 4. That's very inefficient. All right, so you want to always be working with order. You can do that with a chart. That's a classroom staple. That's something that you can make that would be worth getting it laminated and spending a lot of time on. Okay, you can also make small flashcards. You can make things where, remember, we're going to be teaching them from scratch numbers, right? And so we have to teach them the number names, don't we? So there's all kinds of pocket things that you can buy and pocket things that you can make little cards. And when they're in first grade and it's still September and they don't know their numbers and they don't understand it, the place value, you have a bunch of little cards or little tiles that have, you know, you've got 10 ones, you've got 10 twos, you've got little cards, and then you ask them to make the number 12. You ask them to make the number 45. What can they do? That's a manipulative. They take their hands and they find the 4 and they put it in the tens place. They find the 5, they put it in the ones place, right? That's a manipulative. And teaching from scratch, you have to be creative, okay? And then you have to think things through. You have to be creative, think things through, and you have to do at least visualize brand new foundational concepts, like before and after, greater than, less than. The best is for you to have a manipulative, but you must at least have some type of visual aid. Then they can see where 35 is right in front of the 36, the after number. The idea of greater than and less than starts with larger and smaller. Is this larger or smaller? Well, they've got their number chart. They'll be able to see it. Okay? That it does come before, so it is a smaller number. All of these things have to be linked. They're semi-concrete, somewhat, and so then they become even more abstract. That's an abstract concept, so you have to be creative with it, you have to visualize it, and you have to practice it. And I use the word creative because in my mind, sometimes I don't realize that they don't understand what I'm saying. So you need to realize, and I want you to really think of that word, scratch. You are teaching from scratch. So you have to stop, you have to be creative, you have to think it through, you must visualize it, and you must practice it. And by visualize, if you can get it down to the highest level of doing, they're going to remember, what is that, 90%? Around 90% if they do it. They're going to get their place value if they actually do it. The same thing is true with carrying with addition. So you're going to be teaching them greater than and less than. Okay, so you're going to be creative. I noticed that you used the alligator, which I don't particularly like because I'm an upper and it's intuitively backwards to me, but it's creative and it gets the point across. It has a cute little poem with it. All right. I kind of teach it in a different way. I always think of this as pointing. And I always think that the larger number points at the smaller number, okay? And when I taught second grade, remember I told you Valerie and Juliana were in there. Well, Valerie's very short as a second grader, as you can imagine. So I call her up to the front of the room, and I'm a much bigger number. And so her standing next to me, and me, I started pointing at her and making fun of her. Ha ha ha, you're smaller than me, I'm bigger than you. So it makes more sense to me that the bigger end of the arrow is on the bigger number. Okay, right? And the alligator, like this one, would be, let's say, 4 is less than 7. So I guess the little alligator's really hungry, so he's going to eat a lot. Was that the analogy? Yeah, I don't like that, but it is a cute idea to have a big mouth and that you're eating. But I don't know. I don't have a first grade teacher, second grade teacher mind. But the point is that you need to be creative, you need to visualize, and you need to practice. Okay? And practice a lot. And practice frequently, and then practice it again a couple days down the road, and practice it again out of the blue 2 weeks down the road. Do you understand that? So you are teaching number order from scratch. You are teaching rounding from scratch. You are teaching carrying from scratch. So what are you going to do? What 3 things? You're going to, keep in mind guys, I was at the seminar also. So we are going to verbalize. Are you ready? Because you're teaching from scratch, you are going to be creative, you are going to visualize, and you're going to practice a lot, a lot, a lot. Okay, now that was me verbalizing. Let's try this again, okay? Because you're a primary teacher, because you're teaching first graders or second graders, you are teaching from scratch. So that means you are going to be creative, not me. Okay? And then what are you going to do? Visualize. And then practice. A lot, a lot, a lot. Visualize. Visual aids, manipulatives. Not visualize is got to be a little bit more than just your eyes, but it fits the best. Okay, so if you're a primary teacher, you are teaching from scratch. So that means you are going to be creative. I could also say you're going to be cute, okay? But I don't mean in a sarcastic way, okay? So you're going to be creative, you're going to visualize, and you're going to practice a lot, frequently, and so forth. Okay, so with greater than or less than, you do need to be creative. And you need to use it a lot. You need to visualize it. You need to make little greater than or less than. She made a several alligators. Okay? So this little alligator is going to, he's so hungry he's got to eat 8 fish or something. I don't know. But you see why I have a little trouble with that analogy. It confuses me. But you'll have to be creative. Could it be that when you're being creative, you kind of go the wrong way? That's going to happen to you. So you'll have to back it up, redo it, throw it away, start over, and then you'll think, oh, that didn't work. Is that going to happen to you? Yes. But if you're creative and you're working to visualize and then practice, you're going to be successful. Will you have mistakes? Of course you will. So greater than and less than, it is directly related to the number line. This is the concept behind it. Now, in arithmetic, we don't have negative numbers. We have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's keep going. 7, 8, 9. Why does greater than point to the left? I'm sorry, to the right. Why does greater than point to the right? The further right we go, the larger the number. That's literally why that points this way. It's to the right of. A number that is to the right will always be larger. So 6, okay, is on what side of the 3? Here's my 3. What side of the 3 is the 6? It's to the right. 6 is greater than 3. Less than is left. It almost looks like an L, right? Slightly turned on its side. So order is based on the number. Actually, that's not a number line. That's a number array. But because we don't have the negatives. But that's what the direction of the arrow is based on left and right, which has its foundation in the number line. Okay, rounding. Rounding. Rounding is another concept that you are teaching from scratch. So you have to be creative. What else do you have to do? Visualize. And what else do you do? Practice. How much? Once? Oh, that lesson's over? No, a lot. Frequently. And you keep bringing it up later and later down the road. Okay, so rounding you are teaching from scratch. So you have to be creative. Maybe we could think of another C. Should we add another one? I only had 3, but every time I'm teaching, I always think of another one. How about careful? I told you what I did. I blew it with rounding. Okay, because I was not thinking of how literal and basic rounding was. I don't think about rounding. I don't teach rounding in high school. I do have to correct some rounding mistakes and really reinforce it even with 7th graders behind the decimal. But I don't teach from scratch. And so you have to be careful because I did make a mistake, and you will too. But with the rounding, you do want to visualize it. Even on a blackboard, it can be visualized. It might even be easier to visualize it in written form instead of manipulative form. Because when we're talking about, let's say we have the number 36. I'm liking 36 today. Okay? And we can draw a number segment. And 36 is between, they also have to learn about between numbers. I'm always surprised that a 1st grader doesn't know what I mean when I say 36 is between what 2 numbers? They can't come up with 30 and 40. Okay, so you're going to have to be creative. And you're going to have to visualize it and practice it and so forth. So it helps them to understand why we round up. Remember, you're teaching primary. You're going to be working in terms of concept a lot more than I do as an upper teacher. As an upper teacher, I do a lot of procedure. They already understand the foundations of what we're doing, and I'm expanding to more numbers, harder rounding. I'm taking the rounding and I'm applying it to behind the decimal, but they already have the rounding idea down. So what is rounding? Rounding is, if we take the number 36, first of all, it begins with between. 36 is between 30 and 40. All right, as a 2nd grader, they're not going to be rounding in the higher places, are they? We're going to concentrate in rounding to the nearest tens, just with the first 2 places. So 36 is between 30 and 40. Is it closer to 40 or closer to 30? So we're talking about being creative and careful. I like 36 today, came to my mind, but I'm going to tell you that when I go back and I'm thinking it through and I'm trying to be more careful, I'm going to say, oh, I don't like 36. Can anybody tell me why I don't? All of a sudden here I'm thinking, I'm not going to start with 36. I don't like that. I need to be more careful. Why am I going to change it? I'll tell you what I would change it to right now that I think about it. I'm thinking, oh, I don't like 36. I'm going to start with 38. Does anybody know why? On second thought, I am going to abandon the 36 and I'm going to do that. Why? What do you think?
They might start thinking with 36, rounding higher.
Well, they're going to round higher. I want to start with a more obvious example. 36 is kind of in the middle, isn't it? So is that a good one to start with? Now, I'm an upper teacher, and I don't worry about rounding, and so I did not choose carefully. Okay? Even though that's what I thought I would, I'd just pick a number. But I have to choose more carefully because I'm starting from scratch. So I don't want a borderline example. Now, 36 isn't borderline in my mind, but could it be borderline in the first or second graders? Yes, it's not obviously it wasn't borderline in your mind either. You're thinking, what's wrong with 36? What's wrong with 36? I hope she doesn't call on me. Okay, what's wrong with the 36 is it's not wrong, but it's not a good example for the first one. You want it to be what? Obvious. So I need to be more careful when I'm picking my examples. Okay, and if the more experience you gain, hopefully too, you also learn how to think on your feet. So it's like, oh, 36 isn't good. I'm going to get rid of it. I'm going to go with 38 because it's a whole lot more obvious. A first grader could tell me, or a second grader probably, it'd be more of a second grade concept. A second grader could tell me and answer the question, is 38 closer to 40 or closer to 30? You see what I mean? I certainly would avoid 35. Where's 35? It's right in the middle, so they had to define the rounding rule, didn't they? Okay, and they defined it as 5 is exactly in the middle, and we have decided that we will always go up. Okay? So I'm not going to use 35 because that ruins my illustration. 36 is not as obvious, so it's not as good of an illustration. It is closer to 40, but we could even be even more obvious, especially if you're seeing students that don't know what you're talking about. I could switch to 39, couldn't I? All right, or I could use 32 if I want to illustrate or visualize rounding down. So I need to visualize why. You're teaching from what? Scratch. Okay, so you're teaching from scratch. So what do you have to do? You have to be creative. Let's add that. But be careful. You have to visualize and practice. Okay? There might be times that you do choose a poor example because you're going to be illustrating different concepts all the time, every day. And you may choose a poor example. Get rid of it. Write it down for next time, which is what I'm going to do. And then make sure that you visualize. So they've got to see what you're saying. Do I mean visually? Not really. I mean they have to understand it. They have to see it with their understanding. Okay. Sometimes I notice that I repeat myself and I have certain phrases I use all the time. A lot of times I will say, do you see what I mean? Okay? And that's what I'm talking about here. You need to reach their understanding. You are teaching from scratch. You are teaching foundational concepts. So order with greater than or less than is abstract. So you've got to be creative. You've got to be careful. You've got to visualize it. You've got to practice it and keep introducing it and bringing it back and reviewing it. Rounding, brand new. You're teaching rounding from scratch. So you have to be careful with it. You have to be creative to begin with. Then you want to be careful. You want to make sure that your illustrations are obvious. You don't want to use a borderline illustration. You wouldn't use 5. So it's probably not a good idea for me to use the 36, is it? And then you want to practice it a lot, and that way they become familiar with it. You want them to be familiar with it. You want them to be comfortable with it. How are they going to be comfortable with rounding? Doing it a lot. Okay? So that's rounding, and remember we talked about the rounding rule. 35 here is exactly between 30 and 40. it's not closer to either one, is it? So the rule was defined. So it has to be taught. It also, in a sense, has to be memorized. Can you answer the question, why does 5 go up and not down when it's exactly in the middle? Can you answer that with a mathematics concept? Not really. You'd have to, that's how it was defined. There are certain basic things that were defined. Remember, we said that the place value system is defined on what? Base 10. Why? That's how it was defined. Okay? So the rule is 5 or more, you will round up to the higher place. Okay? So all of these will, and if you're like me, you're always having to race and scoot your line over. That's another reason why, if possible, you get in, put some of your stuff on the board ahead of time. Okay? So that's why 36, 37, 38, 39, 40 are all closer to 40, so I round up to 40. And then we have 34, 33, 32, 31. So the rule is 5 or more, round up, 4 or less, drop down to the 30. Okay, I only had a couple people do the down thing, and it totally threw me off. I couldn't understand why that happened, but so that's why I started to use the word drop instead of round down. Drop the digit, add a 0. So we are going to actually go down to 30, but that's what happens when you're relying on rote procedure. I can say down when I have it visualized, down to 30. You certainly wouldn't go all the way down to 20. But when they're following rote procedure, your procedure cannot mislead them into making a mistake. Okay, so that's why I rethought my steps, because the students that did that, they didn't understand the concept of what we were really doing. And from time to time, you will have students that don't catch the concept the first time. All right, addition. Let's talk about primary addition. Teaching primary number concepts and then teaching primary addition. We're going to talk about areas to cover, and then we're going to talk about some ways to cover it. So in primary math, what will you be covering? First of all, you will have to begin with the concrete. So you will have to teach them what addition is using manipulatives. You bring objects in. If you're a primary teacher, you need to have a whole bunch of objects. Mrs. Leslie had all kinds of objects. I used to borrow from her when I was teaching second grade. She had this big bucket of plastic bugs. Of course, I'm the science teacher, so I'm going to use the plastic bugs, and there were bees in there, they were little, and they were kind of lifelike. So there were bees and butterflies and grasshoppers and beetles, a couple different kinds, and all in the primary colors. So there's a manipulative. All right, so if you are the primary teacher, you're going to be collecting stuff. And it doesn't have to be something that you went to the teacher's store and paid $25 for. You go to use toys, you use everyday objects, you can use food, and so forth. And so with addition, you have to start with the concrete. So you're bringing in the objects, and you are doing what I mentioned with the pencils. I have 3 beetles over here. I have, and I count them, 1, 2, 3, 4 beetles over here. How many do I have all together. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, what? 7. So with addition, it begins with, and this is done in kindergarten, math time, I'm sure of it, but it also has to go back to begin again in first grade. Make sure your students know what addition is, not just have 3 plus 4 equals 7 memorized. So we will begin with understanding the idea of what addition really is in a concrete manner with manipulatives. The idea of all together. And then we go to the correct terminology. 3 plus 4 equals 7. I think, Desiree, you made those big cards. I wish you would have made more of them. But that's a good primary topic. Would have been a good primary number concept. What is that number? Okay, that's kindergarten, and probably a review in first grade. So what you have to go through here is, what is addition? What does it mean? So you're showing them with the concrete objects before you proceed to the abstract symbolism. And even the abstract word, plus. What does that word mean to a first grader? So you start using the word, use words all together, and then you proceed to words like plus and total. Okay, so remember, what are you doing? You're teaching from scratch. And you're also, the next thing you have to spend a lot of drill time on, a lot of practice time on, is the addition families. So that you're doing both. They understand what 3 plus 4 is with objects, but then they also memorize the 3 plus 4 math fact. And put those two together, and then they have the understanding. Then they can use it. Before we go to the idea of setting up addition problems. Okay? You will have to teach them how to set up the 2-digit addition problems. And then you will do some expansion. You'll be adding places and so forth, but one thing at a time. This is primary math. You're teaching from scratch. And even when you do proceed to doing multi-step problems, you have to follow the rule of procedure. What did we say about procedure when we reviewed those 7 steps of the teaching progression? We said, 1 at a time, please. And that's even more critical with primary. So when you are teaching addition from scratch at primary level, you do have to solidify the concept. You do have to be creative, careful, and visualizing and practicing concept, but then you're going to start doing memorization of facts, and you're going to start doing some memorization and practice of procedures. So the next thing that you will do is how to set up set up an addition problem. You teach them to line up the places. You teach them to draw the line and put the plus sign. And when you're doing that, you have to be careful. So if I'm teaching them how to set up a 2-digit problem from the very beginning, this was hard for me. I had to learn to be careful, a lot more careful than I ever am in junior high, or even 5th and 6th grade. What did I have to be careful of right now? No carrying. When I put up a problem on the board in 7th grade, I don't worry about their addition facts, do I? Same thing when I'm doing the subtraction. I have to make sure that I don't have inadvertently have something that needs to be carried. Okay? Because that's the whole next thing that I'm going to get to. So the 4th thing that you will have to do is teach carrying from scratch. So I am not going to have a carrying problem in there accidentally before we get to it, am I? I'm going to keep with small numbers that are not going to go over 10. okay, when I add them. So I will teach them how to set up the procedure of doing the addition problem, of adding the ones column. But I have to teach them to then add the tens column, right? So it's from scratch. So that's why I keep talking about scratch, okay? Maybe I should do some lessons in first and second grade to get my practice back up. But the whole time I had to start thinking that way when I taught that second grade math class. I had to think about scratch, teaching it from scratch. It's the best way I can express it to you. So you're teaching from scratch. Then the next thing, you hit the carrying on purpose when you're ready for it. Don't accidentally put it up there and have to erase it, okay? So what you want to do then is you're teaching carrying from scratch. So what does that mean? You have to be creative. You have to then at the same time be careful. Then you're going to do what? Oh, where am I? Pay attention, where am I? Visualize. Manipulatives. You got to get it concrete, then semi-concrete, and then they'll be able to do it off the top of their head because they'll be comfortable with it. But it's going to take a while. Carrying is important. It's a very foundational procedure of addition. It's not concept because it's not what addition is, but it's a very foundational procedure, and it must be taught carefully, and it must be taught thoroughly, and you want to reach their understanding. And this involves place value when you get to carrying, okay? And we make our numbers here a little bit bigger. I have to be careful that they know their 11 family, don't I? That they know it very well, so that we can concentrate on the carrying aspect, not on what is 4 plus 7, okay? So I do have to make sure my addition facts are getting automatic. So it's not that it's primary. I'm not going to be drilling facts, and I'm not going to rely on their memory. I still have to, but I want to make sure that I already have the 4 plus 7 down. So you are teaching carrying from scratch, and it's a major addition procedure, okay? So then you have to be very careful with it. So you want to make sure that you stay in their family range. Do we want to be tripping over what 4 plus 7 actually is when I'm trying to teach them the carrying procedure? So that's what I mean by careful. Do you see how important it is to have a good curriculum that is already taken care of a lot of this for you? But at the same time, as a teacher, you have to be aware of it when you're making up the problems. All right? Been there, done that. Okay? In second grade. I even substituted for the teacher once. We did a little switch. It was kind of fun. I taught second grade math, and Mrs. Leslie taught Algebra 1. I wasn't in the room, but it was I would have been nice to be a fly on the wall to watch the 9th graders' reaction when Mrs. Leslie came in to teach the algebra class that day. Okay. Actually, it was probably easier for her to teach algebra than for me to teach second grade math. Okay? But, so do you see what I'm saying? So you have to be careful, you've got a plan, and so forth, because this is a major thing. So I don't want to have to be the students wondering about this math fact while I'm trying to teach them the carrying. Does that make sense to you? So you got to be careful. So even though I am not going to be I'm going to still keep these numbers relatively small. I'm not going to use 3. Why not? I really don't want to deal with a 0 here, do I? So I want to clear out all the little confusion things and pick an easy math fact so that I can teach the carrying. And this also has concept in it. What is 4 plus 7? It is 11. Did I see that? I sure did. Uh-oh, I didn't do my job. What do I do with 11? And here's where you're going to be working with the different place values and so forth. Okay, so carrying is, what I want you to get from this idea here is that carrying is a major addition procedure for primary math. I also want you to get the idea that carrying is, you're going to be teaching carrying from scratch. So you have to be creative. You have to be careful. You have to visualize it. You have to practice it. You're going to have to spend time on it. All right? And this is a major addition procedure. So I am going to have Mrs. Brader, when she does her guest lecture for us, she has experience in this. She has experience in teaching place value. I'm going to have her show you that specifically. She also has a lot of experience with carrying, and I'm going to have her show you a good way to teach carrying, not me, okay? I will show you how to do borrowing, but so I'm going to save that for the guest lecture. I'm not covering it now because it's not important. I'm not covering the actual how you should teach carrying because it's so important. I want Mrs. Brader with experience to show you what has worked for her and what has not worked for her, okay? So, addition concepts in primary. Obviously, you're going to have to teach them what addition is from scratch with manipulatives. Then you're going to have to start into the procedure realm by teaching them how to just write the problem and set it up and draw the line and put the plus sign. You're going to have to teach and use the terminology that will not be familiar to them. Plus. What other terminology do you have to introduce and start making them familiar with? Add in, sum. So that does play a role. The 7 steps of the teaching progression will work at all levels. It's just different emphasis, and different things are new and different things are more difficult at different levels. And then, yes, you will teach them how to carry. And that, of course, is the major procedure for addition. All right, so as far as you're concerned, I'm having you just work through the beginning sections of that textbook just to get a refresher on basic addition and so forth. So then my next class period, I want you to have the addition quiz taken and the addition practice. All right, so we will see you on Tuesday.